Hi, I'm here with Troy Hiltbrand, CIO of Amare Global, and we're going to talk about automation in the retail industry. So, Troy, can you tell me how do you use automation in your business?
Automation is key to any retail organization. One of the things that we leverage highly from an automation standpoint is our scalability. So leveraging our resources in a cloud-based environment, we have thousands of servers. They're fairly small servers, but they each do a piece of the automation flow. And where we utilize automation is that we don't just have one instance of each of those processes. We have multiple instances, and they can work in parallel. And what the automation allows us to do is to scale up and scale down on an as-needed basis. So if we have a sale in one region of the world, or we have a holiday in another region of the world, it allows us to scale up and down without ever having to touch the system. We leverage some of the tools that are in Amazon Web Services to be able to do that, from a containerization standpoint of those processes to a creation or an automated creation of those containers and spinning up those containers so that we can handle any size of load that might come at us.
Okay. Now imagine also going back to keeping servers up 24/7, you also have to you have to comply with regulation. So imagine you need to have pretty good backups, redundancy, high availability, and things like that. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. So utilizing Amazon Web Services gives us some of that flexibility where we can have multiple instances of our processes that are running at the same time. We also have infrastructure as code, which means that we have those instances and those processes are established based on code. So we can store those off and have a backup of those, but then we take that code and we spin up new instances. So that gives us the redundancy that we need. It gives us the scalability that we need and the backup and configuration. So if we lose processes or we lose servers, it's as easy as just spinning up a new one and shutting down the old one. So really, it gives us that self-healing capability across all of our infrastructure.
Okay. Do you have everything in the cloud, or you have some on premises?
We have most everything in the cloud. There is a little bit that is on premise, mainly for local file storage that needs to be shared across departments.
Okay. And do you have to send data from on-premise to on-prem to the cloud and vice versa?
We do. Most of our data resides in the cloud. We do pull some of it back to local on-prem servers, but for the most part, it's going from cloud to cloud or from instance to instance in the cloud. And then we leverage different data technologies inside of the cloud to support us.
Okay. And what about your data analytics and artificial intelligence? What are your views on starting to use artificial intelligence to improve your data analytics and making sure you have the right data sets?
So with artificial intelligence and machine learning, we've leveraged it to look at some of the behaviors, trying to anticipate what is going to happen in the future and looking at patterns of the past and cycles and trends of the past to figure out what do we anticipate in the future. So for instance, looking at inventory and identifying where we see lulls or where we see peaks in our inventory consumption, and how do we plan accordingly. We also look at it from the standpoint of our revenue and sales and trying to predict out what that could look like in the coming months. All leveraging mainly the machine learning capabilities and the predictive analytics space. Right now, with artificial intelligence, with some of the tools with the large language models and some of the image generation and the natural language generation and generative AI, they're things that we are looking into, but we don't have anything rolled out in production yet.
Okay. Are you thinking of, does that make you question the way you manage your data, that you might need more for the artificial intelligence? Or that you have to have new ways of curating it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that becomes very important is looking at sparse data and trying to figure out, do we need to generate synthetic data? And then how do we generate synthetic data? What does that mean in terms of not only the creation and the filling in the gaps of our sparse data, but what is the impact on our models? Does it make our models less accurate? How do they all work together? So yes, the concept of data and artificial intelligence and machine learning, it goes hand in hand. There's some wicked problems out there that are on the horizon. I don't think that we've solved them yet, but we're working on them.
Okay. Now, are the synthetic data has to do with the customer data, or what?
So with our business, we have customer data. We have a business to business to consumer model. So we also are looking at our business partners, those who are reselling and trying to look at the activity that they have, who's being successful in reselling our product and who's not, and trying to isolate who those successful resellers are and be able to share those secrets with other resellers. And so that's part of our overall data and analytics strategy.
Okay. So, Troy, what are some of the challenges for CIOs in retail and keeping websites running 24/7?
So in terms of e-commerce, having a global footprint and a global business means that you're always on 24/7, 365. That means that your customer base doesn't sleep. It moves from one region to the next. That means that from a perspective of being able to take downtime on your site, you're limited. You have to find hours or time periods that have the lowest amount of traffic, which could be middle of the night, could be middle of the day, depending on where your customer base is. You just have to monitor and maintain what those lulls are. And it could be certain days of the week, it could be certain hours of the day, or it could be certain times during the year, depending on the cyclical activity of your customer base.
Okay. So, as most of us have noticed, data is more important than ever. Can you talk about the challenges and meeting requirements for collecting and managing data?
Absolutely. So data is the heartbeat of any e-commerce or retail site. You have really two different things that you're trying to accomplish with data. The first is business decision making. So you want to have the right data to power decision makers. So that means the right data at the right time in the right format, so the decision makers can make those decisions based on a logical set of quantifiable facts instead of just intuition. In addition to that, you have compliance rules and regulations. This requires that you store data for years. You might never need it from a decision-making perspective, but you might have to go back and recall some of that data so that you can answer discovery questions, you can answer any type of compliance concern that come from your customer base, from regulators. And so that concept of data, you're organizing it in different ways. Some for decision making needs to be highly accessible, highly real time, whereas with compliance, you're looking at it from the perspective of long-term storage. You might never need to recall that, but when you do, it becomes very, very important.
Okay. And so what about what are the challenges in ensuring data accuracy?
So not all data is created equally. Some data requires a much higher level of data accuracy than others. Some you just need, a general sense of what the data is telling you. Other data, especially when it comes to compliance and regulatory, does need to be highly accurate. You need to be able to paint the right picture of what happened in the past. When we look at predictive data that is going out to the future, you want a level of accuracy as well. But because of the fact that you're creating an abstract vision of the future and predictions based on that abstract vision of the future, the accuracy does not need to be as high. Because of the fact that the more generalized and the more abstract you're going to take that summarized information, the less important the individual data accuracy is. So it really comes down to the use cases around that data. And so as a data professional, you have to understand what is the nature of the usage of your data, and then be able to apply the right level of data accuracy, because data accuracy is also not free. And so different levels of data accuracy are going to have different levels of cost. And so you have to be able to balance that cost versus value assessment.
Okay. And I imagine that most retailers have to exchange data with partners, and I imagine there must be some challenges around that. What are some of the challenges around exchanging data with partners?
So when working with partners, there's a couple of different things that are critical. One is the format that the data is going to be transferred in. There needs to be an agreement between parties as to what is sent and what is going to be received, so that there is not a disconnect, the data is not getting dropped or lost in that process. There also has to be an agreement in terms of the data frequency, how often that data is coming across. Because if the supplier and the provider and the consumer of that data transfer are not in agreement, you could have data loss, you could have delays in the process. The other thing that becomes critical is that when you're looking at the concept of CRUD, or create, read, update, and delete, a lot of times when looking at data transfer, you think about the create. So you're going to send information and it's just going to live in your supply chain partners' systems. The challenge comes in when you need to do things like updates or deletes. How do you do those? What is the agreement that you have with your supply chain partners in terms of how you're going to make modifications to the data that gets over there? And sometimes even more challenging, what happens if you need to remove data that is in their systems? Is there a way that you can do that?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you tell me about some of the challenges in managing triggers and responding in a timely and efficient manner, and the kinds of triggers you have?
So today's customer base they have high expectations when it comes to real-time triggers of activity. So just envision when you place an order and you want an email receipt within seconds. Well, that gets magnified when you have different types of triggers. So you might be looking at inventory when something's out of stock. How does your site get updated in near real time so that you don't sell any more of those items that can't be fulfilled? Or from a delivery standpoint, Amazon is probably the gold standard of this, that they have very good tracking of where your packages are. Now, it goes beyond just the ability to log into the UPS or FedEx website and see where your package is. They do outbound messaging as well, kind of micro events. Mm-hmm. So when the delivery provider is in your neighborhood, you'll often get a text that allows you to know that, hey, they're on their way. It's going to be here in 15 or 20 minutes. That's the thing that consumers are starting to expect, is that they don't want stale information. They want up-to-date information. They want actionable information. And these triggers drive an architecture that allow for those triggers to happen. One of the challenges with a trigger-based architecture or an event-based architecture is who's producing those triggers and who's consuming. So is it your applications that are creating those? Or is it another system that is going out and interrogating your application and identifying when those events are happening and spawning off those triggers, maybe within the same system or to another system? And so this concept of message queues and service-based architecture, where these different systems can work in an orchestrated fashion, looking at the status, but keeping it from a consumer-based standpoint. They all see it as one system. They see it as the company's interface, and they just have expectations that they're going to get into those micro event information in real time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and as the larger the company gets, as companies get older, they have disparate systems. You went through your your ERP, your CRMs and things. What are the challenges around managing disparate systems?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge that we have today is that everybody wants modern systems. Not everybody has modern systems. If you're a startup and you're building from the ground up, you can leverage some of these modern architectures to do that, that message-based information sharing and real-time information sharing. When you're starting to look at some of these older companies that have legacy systems, they were not built for this. And so you have to look and see, how do we retrofit these concepts into these legacy systems? Because it's not always possible to just swap out systems. That's can be relatively easy for a startup company or a new company that is building it from the ground up. But if you have these large systems that have been around for 10, 20, 40, 50 years, you don't have that flexibility. And so what you have to do is figure out, how do you find technology that can live on top of those systems and give you some of that same capabilities without just replacing the systems.
Okay. Now, what about reporting? What kinds of reporting is important to for CIOs to make sure everything's working? And what are some of the challenges in producing those reports and ensuring accuracy?
So when you're looking at a system, the concept of telemetry comes into play, which is monitoring the heartbeat of your systems. What does that look like? Well, it might be just uptime. That's one that is relatively easy from an operational standpoint. But what about when you're looking at data quality, or you're looking at the changes of data? One of the things that we see today, especially in newer applications, is that they're leveraging NoSQL databases. And with NoSQL databases, the concept is that from one record to another, the shape of the data or the structure of the data can change. And as it changes, it's not a huge issue because these NoSQL databases support it on the front end, and they can evolve. But what happens is that the downstream processes now have to be self-healing, and they have to be able to recognize the change in data and respond accordingly so that they don't break. So as a CIO, not only are you looking at system uptime anymore, but you're looking at system effectiveness. You're looking at, are there parts and pieces of that are slowing down, that are stopping? Do you have traps inside of your ETL processes that are filtering out bad data? And are those pulling more and more data elements coming out as bad data just because the source has changed? And so from a reporting standpoint, you really have to start looking at not just the operational nature of your systems, but the effectiveness of your systems, and what that user experience is on the back end, in terms of, are they getting a complete and robust experience, and are your systems operating at a level that they can give that?
Okay. So what is the single most important data pipeline in your organization? And is it possible to visualize it and monitor it as a whole, including SLAs?
So I think that a lot of times CIOs, like I said, will look at those operational nature of metrics. They'll look at the operational uptime. Those are things that they're important, and they're fairly easy to visualize. The dashboards just look at, what is your percentage of uptime, and a lot of times that's what people use as their service level agreement. But I think that the next stage is really that data quality, is trying to identify how many of my records are actually flowing through my entire process. And again, on the back end, what is that experience that customers are having? Now, you can measure that in different components as the data flows through the pipeline, but ultimately, you're looking at it from some of the KPIs that the business uses, which is, what is happening with revenue? What is happening with attrition and retention? They're harder to tie to a data pipeline, but they're no less important. And so when we start looking at SLAs of the past, they're starting to change to OKRs, which are really more strategic measures that the organization has in terms of its success. And so a CIO needs to understand, what is the business trying to do, and how is IT contributing to the effectiveness of those OKRs, and how is it driving business success. And the more you drive business success, it means that your systems are having efficiency. And then you can back into some of those efficiency and operational metrics, but just focusing on those alone is not sufficient anymore.
Okay. Now, what does OKR stand for?
It's your objectives and key results.
Okay.
So it's your set of metrics that are more business facing, and they represent what is success for the company.
Okay. So what keeps retail CIOs up at night?
I think that just making sure that their customer base is happy, that they have stickiness in their site and with their product. I think that today is becoming something that CIOs are becoming more aware of. It is definitely keeping them up at night, partly because of the fact that CIOs have now taken a place at the executive board, and they're having these discussions with the CFOs and the COOs and the CEOs about what's driving the business. So unlike the CIOs of the past, that all they would have to do is just make sure the lights were on and they were good. Now they're business partners. And so the challenges that they have and the things that keep them up at night are those same things that are keeping the CEO up at night, which really comes down to profitability, sustainability, scalability of the business as a whole.
Okay. Well, that was very interesting, Troy, and thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us.